All right, well, it's my privilege to introduce to you your leadership team here at Salem. And as I work my way through the names and give just a little bit of information about each member of the leadership team, if they're here, and most are, but if they're here, we'll ask them to raise their hands so that you can pick them out of the crowd. And we're going to begin with Kathy Anderson. And Kathy is back here. Kathy is a retired physical therapist, an associate professor at the U. She serves here at Salem in a number of different ways. She's the chair of our missions ministry team, serves with the funeral lunch group at Awana and Momco, so active here at Salem. Dan Stennis Rognes, who I believe is enjoying the snow in Florida this week, has served on the finance team for the last couple of years and has served as our treasurer for the last year and a half. He and his wife Suzanne have been members here at Salem for 3 years. Suzanne serves on the Sunday lecture series and the Good Neighbor teams. Matt Gill is in the back. Matt, Julie, and their 3 kids have been here at Salem for 10 years and have been actively involved in children's ministry and youth group, LMDJ, and many other areas of ministry. And this is Matt's 5th year on the leadership team, so thank you, Matt. Tom Johnson is a retired covenant pastor, and I believe Tom is not able to join us tonight, but he and his wife Pat have been attending Salem for 10 years and appreciate the fellowship here, and they've both volunteered in many different ways at Salem. Kristen Antill is here in the back. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Kristen. All right. So Kristen has been attending Salem for roughly 10 years. She works at Bethel University counseling services as a mental health therapist and is currently working on a Doctor of Ministry program in leadership and spiritual formation from Portland Seminary. Kristen enjoys being part of Salem. And she enjoys the outdoors, taking walks with her husband, Patrick. My name is Steve Walker, and I grew up close by, grew up in St. Anthony Village. I've attended Salem for most of my life, I think over 50 years that I have attended here with my family growing up. And since then, I live in New Brighton with my wife, Carla. We have 3 kids, Grace, Josiah, and Sam. I have been part of Salem's confirmation program for many years, as has Carla, and I have most recently served as the chair of the Bylaws committee, so we're going to hear a little bit more about that tonight. And we have Heidi Carlson, our chair, and Heidi has been attending Salem with her husband Jay and their kids for 14 years, but also attended Salem while in high school and in college, so a long history here. She served on the stewardship committee, has held leadership positions with Momco, and has volunteered with Awana and in the nursery. And she finds great joy in seeing how her kids are growing and enjoying their time here at Salem. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Heidi, but that is your leadership team.
And just a quick reminder that leadership team we're always available, but particularly on the first Sunday of the month. You can find us after the services. We like to spend a little extra time. If you have questions or comments or anything you'd like to talk with us, please come. Like I said, find us anytime, but particularly on those days.
Hey everyone, as the secretary, it is my duty to now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the 2024 Salem Annual Meeting. That was back in July. That can be found on page 4 in your packet, annual report. If you want to take a look and see if there's anything that stands out worthy of discussion, otherwise I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
We've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? I'm giving lots of space because it's several pages of stuff you could read if you wanted to. All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, Pastor Alice, we would like to welcome you up here for a reflection.
Well, good evening. It's great for me to be here with you. I would rather Mark were standing here tonight, but he sends his greetings. I had the privilege of being able to talk with him this afternoon upon their arrival back here in the States. So he sounded good. He said he's feeling good. We'll deal with some jet lag now over the next couple of days, but anticipates being back with us very, very, very soon. But he wanted me to greet you as we gather this evening. So I was thinking about how I was going to approach this tonight, and I saw this is a pastoral reflection. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a reflection and a devotion that I want to share with you tonight. So I'm going to invite you into a journey that God has had me on over these last few weeks. With the start of the new year and some reading and studying, I've been reflecting on a lot on what God has for me this year. Not making a New Year's resolution, but rather continually asking God where He wants me to be putting my time and my energy. What does He want me to be focused on? He's drawn me back to what I consider probably a very familiar passage to all of you in John 15, verses 4 through 11. And so I'd like to read that for us tonight. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that your joy may be in, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. There is so much in this passage that we could be unpacking tonight, but we don't have the time to go into all of that. So what I'd like to do is to encourage us to reflect just on one verse out of this passage, specifically looking at verse 5. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. The branch, Jesus Christ, is doing the work, supplying life to the believers. Our job is to stay connected, to receive the life he provides. It is to abide. So what does it mean to abide? To remain, to stay, to hang out with. It's fixing our eyes on him, calling us to a deeper level of trusting. It's resting and receiving from the branch, Jesus Christ, all that we need. Trusting that he'll sustain us and nourish us, that he will do the work that he has promised to do. Over the last few weeks, I've been continuing to wrestle with this question: what is one thing I would like God to do in my life? I kept waiting for God to reveal something specific, something big that I could put my hands around, that I could do. Something where I could check off the box when it was accomplished. Did you hear all the ayes? Did you ever wrestle with that question? Are you looking for that one big thing that you could do? It's not what we can do. It's about the fruit that God will produce in and through us. God is saying, abide in me. This abiding in him doesn't mean just sitting passively. It means resting in him, engaging with him, receiving his nourishment, so that we can be part of what he plans to do. This nourishment might include things like what you need to learn, or divine appointments, or simply delighting in the Lord and waiting on his timing. Abiding needs to set the tone and the direction for everything we do. There's so much to do, so many things that need to be accomplished. But I think what God is telling us is to focus first on abiding. He will produce the fruit in and through us. Then we will be about the things that are most important to Him, those things that make a difference for eternity. The things we might do in our own strength pale in comparison to the fruit that God will produce and the work that He will accomplish through us, all to be done for His honor and His glory. So what might this mean for you? What does it mean for Salem? Are we a people who are abiding, who are seeking God first and following where He leads? What is God preparing us for? What more does God have for us? What is He asking us to prepare for? Is He pushing you to get involved in a new ministry? To step into a leadership role? To invite someone to Salem? To do more for your family or your friends? As each of us prioritize abiding in Him, He prepares us for the challenges and the opportunities He has for us. If we want to do things of value, we must abide in the vine. I don't know what your life might include right now, but I know that God is the vine that will feed you. He will sustain you. He will give you hope. He will give you joy. Receive your nourishment from Him. Observe what He is doing in and through you as you abide in Him. He is at work. Let us bear fruit that He has for each one of us. God is glorified in our praise, in our worship, and in His believers bearing much fruit. Let us bring honor and glory to Him as we step forward in our lives, in our corporate life together. Would you join with me in a word of prayer? Lord, tonight I give you thanks for the gift of your word. I thank you, Lord, for the way that you move in our lives, taking passages of Scripture that we might have read many times, and then you bring fresh new insights to us. Lord, you call us to abide in you, to receive both rest and nourishment from you so that we might bear much fruit. We are yours, Lord. Continue to work in and through us as your people and as your church for your glory. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Alice. All right, we have an action item now. Each year, Salem has the opportunity to send delegates to both our conference, the Northwest Conference Annual Meeting, and then our denomination annual meeting. The conference annual meeting will take place May 1st through the 3rd at Roseville Covenant Church. And I took a peek at the agenda, and the president of the Covenant denomination will be speaking. So I actually think it sounds kind of interesting. The annual meeting then will take place June 25th to the 28th down in Orlando. We need delegates for both. We have had a couple of folks who have approached us and have expressed interest in attending these two meetings. I have had the privilege of attending both the Northwest Conference meeting and our denomination annual meeting as well. And I actually find them fascinating. So I think you learn a lot about what's going on, both kind of locally here at the Northwest Conference, but also nationally and globally. It's very encouraging to hear what's happening within the covenant. And so if you are at all interested in attending either of those, please, you can talk with me or with Pastors Mark or Pastor Alice. So the action item this evening, we do not have a full slate of delegates, and so we are asking for you to approve the leadership team approving those delegates when we have a full slate. So do I have a motion to approve?
So move the leadership team to approve the slate of delegates.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Is there? Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. I'm going to now call Steve Walker up to present on the bylaws and constitution. This team has been very hard at work, and we just want to thank that committee again. They have been working quite tirelessly for a long time. I know that some of those members are here. Jeff Tenzing, Bob Grant, Heather Johnson is on that committee, Nichelle Call, Jay Barnes, Steve Depravani. Am I missing anybody?
I think we got everybody there.
Thank you
Yeah.
to all of those who have worked very, very hard on this committee.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. All right, well, I think this is maybe the fourth update, I don't know, right, that we've given. It's been a long time, right, since we formed our committee to review the bylaws and the Constitution. And so tonight is a milestone because this evening we are formally presenting the recommendations from the committee to the congregation. And so we're going to give a little overview of the process, kind of what we've, how we've arrived at where we are this evening. But we're, as a committee, really grateful for the process that we have gone through, the support of the leadership team and the congregation, and really pleased to be done. So we've talked through the names of the committee that have helped work through this process over the last 21 months. I think that's what I calculated looking at the calendar. So it's been almost 2 years of meetings and review and gathering congregational feedback and discussion and deliberation. And it's been a good, I think, healthy process that we have worked through. So next slide, maybe just a quick review, right? 21 months ago, the leadership team made the decision to form a special committee, and so we called together the members that were listed there and given the charter to do a thoughtful and comprehensive review of the Constitution and bylaws, something that hadn't been done for, I think, 15 years. So it was overdue. And we wanted to make sure that we did a thorough review and that we provided opportunities for the congregation to provide feedback, and that we would consider that as well as best practice within the covenant and best practice with looking at some similar work done by other churches. And we also hoped that through the process we might bring a better understanding of what the Constitution and bylaws mean in terms of governance to the congregation, that there would be some opportunity to kind of talk through how these documents apply in the life of the church. Next slide. So we went through a process kind of at the beginning of gathering feedback from the congregation. You may recall, if you were here 2 years ago, where we provided an opportunity to answer a survey. We had 100 people, right, that actually filled out the survey, which I think is remarkable. I don't know about you, but I get a lot of requests for surveys. I don't fill out very many of them in my life, right? But a lot of people participated, and there was great comments and great feedback, and it was a lot for our committee to work through. And as it might be surprising that not all of the feedback agreed, right? So there were some different opinions, right, about what should be done with governance at Salem, and so we worked through that, right? We talked through all of that feedback, we broke it down, we talked it through, and we felt like most of the feedback was positive and supportive of what's being done, right? We have a many good things, right, that happen at Salem, And I think first and foremost, that's to be acknowledged. The kinds of questions and concerns that were raised really fell into the categories of trust and transparency, right? In our governance, how do we find greater or higher confidence in the work that's being done by the leadership team? How do we have better insight into the work that's being done so that we have confidence, right, that in how decisions are made and so on. And so trust and transparency kind of became the themes of, as we processed feedback and as we worked through this process, to say, how do we try to strengthen governance in these areas? All right, next slide. So I'm going to say that the process of reviewing these documents has kind of fell into three categories, right? We had the initial phase where we gathered congregational feedback, we deliberated, we talked through what changes might be appropriate. We brought those changes to the congregation, or to a congregational meeting. We brought copies of all of those recommended changes that were approved by the leadership team at that time. And then we held some congregational kind of special meetings. We just opened it up to the congregation to come and ask questions, right, for anybody that would like to ask questions about the recommendations that were made. We held a couple of meetings. We had some good attendance, good participation, lots of questions, and some additional feedback. And that feedback has translated into some additional changes, right? We worked through some additional changes to the recommendations that were made. And we also took the work that was done and we hired an attorney that specializes in the area of bylaws and governance documents, especially as in the area of supporting churches with these documents, and asked for a review, right? And that process resulted in a lot more feedback. And I think as a committee, we were hoping that the attorney would just kind of look at the changes that we made or that we proposed and would just say, yeah, those changes are okay, right? Those make sense. But what we received back was it was a review of the entire document, and there was comments throughout those documents, right, through the Constitution and bylaws. And so there was comments on things that we, as a committee, didn't recognize or think needed to be changed, but there was still feedback and suggestions like, hey, you really should think about this. So there's three different kind of phases to gathering feedback. There's no way in one meeting this evening to talk through all of those changes. If you've picked up, there are copies of the document on the table. Hopefully you grabbed one on your way in. And if you look at it, you'll see that things that are changed from the original document are highlighted in blue text. Some things are crossed out, saying that we've removed that language. There's some text in there that is, in blue text, not struck, which is new language. And even for me, as I look through this, it's like there's a lot of changes. It almost feels like an overhaul. But I think in terms of the substantive or the real meaningful changes to the document, there are some, but most of it is really in the area of clarifying language, right? Making things clearer about process, clearer about what governance means, so that, right, that it should be easier for the leadership team to understand and follow, right, the governance as it's laid out. So we brought most of the changes to the congregation in a previous meeting. The things that haven't been brought to the congregation are the things that came from additional feedback, right, from the review with the review meetings. Kind of, maybe we'll call that round 2 of feedback, and then the feedback from the attorney. And so, at the risk of making this discussion too long, I'm going to just point out a couple of things that have happened since the last time or since the first time we presented this. So, feedback from the congregation led us to make a couple of changes. There were some questions about just making sure that we're clear about the leadership team acting in a formal legal way, right, on behalf of Salem. We wanted to make sure that that was clear. There were some questions about the executive committee, which is, right, a small subset of the leadership team that gathers on a regular basis to just work through kind of agendas of meetings and set that sort of thing, but to clarify the role of that committee within leadership, so that we've added some language there. A really good recommendation that came from the process, which is, hey, we should really make sure that we formalize the review of these documents going forward so that we don't go another 15 years, right, before we review. So we've added some language about making sure that that happens on a regular basis every 5 to 7 years. And lastly, was just making sure that in our bylaws we recognize or acknowledge that it's part of our process to gather or to receive congregational feedback about the review process of our pastors, right? And so any member of our congregation, right, is invited to, right, to provide feedback about about how things are going with governance of the church and with our pastors, but that would be considered in the review process. There's already language in there that says we want to do it in a formal way, right, that we will be soliciting feedback on a regular basis, I don't know, every few years, right, that we'll be gathering that feedback in the formal review process. So those are things that came from, I guess maybe one more piece here. There was a request that we make sure that the nominating committee, when we are nominating individuals for leadership roles, that we make sure that those names are provided ahead of time before we vote, so that everybody is aware of what that slate is. All right. The next set of changes, though, come from feedback from our attorney, right, in the review process. And again, lots of red ink, right, that we had to kind of talk through as a committee regarding that feedback. And most of it, again, was in the area of just clarifying. When you reference the church in the document, right, throughout the document, be clear, right, on what it means that you're referencing, right, in the church. Be clear that we're using language that helps us to understand we're talking about Salem Covenant Church. So as we read through it, hopefully you'll see that many of the changes really fit into that category, and hopefully you'd see how it might make things clearer for us. But there were a few things that I've highlighted in yellow on this slide and on the next couple of slides that we, would just say they're maybe more than just clarification. And the attorney suggested that the approval process for changes to the Constitution should be higher. The standard should be higher than just for normal approval on other things, right? It should be more. There should be more of a consensus in the congregation to make changes to these governance documents than for just simple majority kinds of decisions on other areas of leadership. So the recommendation was to raise the bar. So we moved that from 2/3 to 3/4 to say that making a change to the Constitution requires a slightly higher bar than even changes to the bylaws documents. Another area that we made a change was our attorney pointed out that you really don't have clarity within the bylaws in those circumstances where we need to delegate authority to fill a gap. So if we just said, let's say that our treasurer becomes ill, can't carry out their duties, that the leadership team needs to have the authority to be able to appoint or to designate someone to carry on those responsibilities in those circumstances until such time as we can have a formal review or a formal change in those roles. And then the last thing that I pointed out is there's a whole new section at the very end which addresses kind of tax exemption related things. I did not find it to be very interesting reading personally, but it was recommended from the attorney that we are very clear about what our tax status is, as a church, as our organization, and that within that there would be some indemnification of the leadership team. And indemnification just means that in the event that someone decided to bring a lawsuit against the church, that if there was a lawsuit that was brought against an individual on the leadership team, which would be a possibility that anyone could be sued for anything, within our culture, that indemnification just means that the church will take responsibility for helping to defend, the members of a leadership team in the case of litigation. So that was something that was called out as something that you really should consider, and that's a normal best practice within an organization. If you expect people to step into leadership roles, they should expect to have the support of the organization, that they're going to be serving. All right, next slide. So just a quick review then of the timeline, 21 months, lots of meetings, gathering feedback, processing that feedback, doing report outs to the congregation, legal review, and we've processed all of that, and we have now come to the congregation with the final, what we are saying is the final recommendations of those changes. And our bylaws require that the congregation have time to process these changes, We don't just bring it tonight and say, look at, these, 100 changes to the document and we're going to vote on it. The bylaws require at least 60 days of advance notice. The Constitution has an even higher standard. Any change to the Constitution requires 6 months. And it requires approval from the covenant, to make changes to the Constitution. But we're bringing both the Constitution and the bylaws to the congregation this evening with the expectation that we're going to vote at the annual meeting in July. So 6 months from now, we're going to vote on these proposed changes. And that gives each of us 6 months, for those that are interested, to dig into the proposed changes, ask questions, get some clarity on that before we bring it to a vote. And so we encourage everyone to read through these proposed changes. And we encourage you to ask questions. But I want to be clear that we have now moved into a different phase in this process, We're no longer soliciting feedback to make changes to the recommendation, These are now the recommendations. And if there are questions or discussion or a suggestion that we do something different than what's been proposed, that's welcomed. But what it will mean at our next meeting is that we will strike out changes that are being proposed. So if there's some disagreement or we think that some part of what's being recommended, we would prefer that it be something different, then we'll strike that change from what's been proposed here, and we'll move forward with the pieces that are approved, And for the pieces that we think should be something different, then we'll make that adjustment. We'll present that to the congregation, and in 6 months we'll vote on those changes, right? If we want to do something different than what's been proposed. So I'm just going to pause and see if there's any questions. Most of you are still awake, which I think you should be commended for. This is important work, though, that's happened over these last 20 months, and I think what is represented here, our hope and our prayer is that the changes that are represented here will strengthen the governance, right, of Salem Covenant moving forward. And that's our prayer. So with that, I don't think we're not making any motions this evening. We're presenting this to you for your review. And if there are, maybe the next slide. Yes, if you have questions, you can certainly reach out to our committee through the website or through the email address or the email box, right, that we set up at the beginning of this process. I've asked that we submit those questions soon, just because I don't want to have to check that email box for the next 6 months. But if you have questions and you submit it to that email address, as a committee, we'll make sure that we provide some feedback or an answer. But at any time between now and July, if you have questions, you certainly can bring those to the church office, and they'll make sure, right, that those questions find their way to our committee. And we'll, again, be happy to respond to that. Okay? Yes, Bob.
I'd just make a suggestion to you as you read it. Ignore what's crossed out. Read through first to get a sense of what it says. Don't get bogged down in all the details. You can go back and look at that, but to understand, I think it'll be easier if you just read the open text. Otherwise, you may get lost.
That's the voice of experience right there, right? As we work through this, and just recognize that some of the things that are crossed out, some things are crossed out simply because they're duplicated, right, in different places within the documents. And so, again, that was feedback from the attorney. It's like it really needs to be cleaned up, so we don't have things duplicated in the Constitution and in the bylaws and in different sections of the bylaws. So some of it is again, just for clarity. Yes, question?
For consideration, I would suggest that you create a file, a document of the history of why and how you went through this process, if changes were made, because otherwise, in 5 to 7 years, there will not be the memory of history. And we don't need to necessarily repeat things with it. And so having a living document to understand the pathway of the changes, we have found useful in some other organizations.
That's a great suggestion. I appreciate that, and I think we have electronic files that are now lots of files in there and lots of revisions, and I think we've attempted to document those things along the way. But even with our committee, as we talk through things to say, well, why is it that way today? Right, we're grateful to have Jeff on our committee, who was in the last review of the, right, and so we relied a lot on his memory, right, of some of those discussions, but having things documented is better, for sure. So another question.
Rick, how do you count 3/4 membership to see if you can pass this one?
So the as far as approving these changes, so I think, Bob, you're going to help me out here. I think that the bar is set that it will be 3/4 of the members that are in attendance of the meeting, provided that we have a quorum, right? And so, and the quorum is it 10, 15%? Gotta go back and double check that, but we have to have a certain number of members at the meeting, and then 3/4 or 2/3 of those that are in attendance will have to approve.
And not the 3/4 yet.
It's not 3/4 yet, it's
The
2/3.
vote in July will be according to the current guidelines, which would be what a current quorum is defined as and the current.
2/3.
Yeah. Great question, thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Jeff?
Just one comment, you commented about timing of if any additional changes were said in
Yeah.
there. And I know with the Constitution, we've held with the 6-month notice, but in the event that that the Constitution itself and changes to it were accepted as is without additional and approved at that meeting, but there were some bylaw changes, those could, after 60 days, result in a meeting, a congregational
Sure.
meeting to vote on those, correct?
Yeah, that's a good clarification, Jeff. So we wouldn't have to wait another 6 months. So if there are some changes that are proposed when we have our discussion in 6 months, when we have that meeting, if there are changes that are proposed there and we felt like they're really important, we could turn it around in 2 months, right? And we could hold a special meeting for that vote.
For bylaws.
For bylaws, not the Constitution, for bylaws. Yeah.
That could even be done between now and the July meeting.
Yes.
The bylaws could, if there were really significant recommendations, and we all agreed, yeah, that's a good idea. We could do that, and then, again, with a 60-day notice before.
Yeah. 6-month review period for the congregation for constitutional changes, 60 days for bylaws changes. What we are recommending or bringing tonight is a suggestion that we're going to do them both together in 6 months. Give everyone that time to review it. We could do it differently if we wanted. That's how we're proposing we handle it on this round. Other questions? Other feedback from the committee, right, than things that maybe I missed or things that could be said better or differently? Okay, I think we should move on. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Steve is ready to be done talking about Constitution and bylaws, but we are very, very grateful to Steve and to the committee, so thank you very much. As he mentioned, we will be voting on it in July. So Marcy is going to come and give us our budget review. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Marcy Tenzing. I'm the business administrator, and I have some good news to report. It's very exciting. So this is a financial report on the first 6 months of the fiscal year, and our actual general fund income was $826,000, and that's compared to a budget for the first 6 months of $824,000. So we are $2,000 over budget, which is exciting. And then compared to last year at this time, the first 6 months of last year, we were only at $751,000. So we've had a 10% increase over last year's. Our expenses the first 6 months is just over $800,000 compared to a budget of $824,000. So we're a little bit behind budget on expenses, under budget. And about $50,000 more than last year. And that is, last year we had some open positions, and so a lot of that difference in expenses this year is because we are full on our staffing. So the next slide is net income. So if you just take the first column there, the blue is our income, the first green is our expenses, and you take the difference, that's our net income. So we ended this first half of the year with $26,000 in income. Our budget is just about zero, so our budget that we approved last July was to have a zero budget, so our expenses and our income to match. So that's what our goal is for this year. And last year we were kind of right about $832, so we were about 0 last year too. So we're looking really good so far this 6 months. The next slide is net cash availability. So this is a target that the leadership team and the finance team look at every month. And what it is just kind of the cash that we have, and we kind of convert that into months. So based on our budget, how many months could we survive if we didn't have any more income? So we are the top line there. We have $777,000 in net cash available, which is about 5.5 months of expenses. Our goal is 3 months, and that's actually the green target, the $412,000. I put a line up there. The dark green line is 5 months, and that's just to give you a little reference so that it's a little bit easier to see. But we are doing really well on net cash. And then the next slide kind of just breaks that net cash down. This is what makes up our net cash. And most of it is in the legacy fund right now. So about 68%. That's why we're looking so well. It's also made up of undesignated, board designated, some building reserve. The reason that we include board designated funds are funds that have been set aside through our budget or through leadership team motions from undesignated. It includes our building reserve. It includes, like I said, the legacy fund is technically a board designated asset. Those can always be redesignated legally by the leadership team. So that's why we include them in net cash. Any money we've been given that's restricted, that the donor restricted, we cannot use for anything else. So that's excluded from these cash numbers. The legacy fund, just as a reminder, is funded by estate gifts primarily that we get. If we get any undesignated estate gifts, it goes into our legacy fund. And then ministry teams are able to write an application to the leadership team to use those funds for things kind of outside our normal budget. So maybe to start a new ministry or to do a capital project. This last year, the new chairs in the contemporary worship service were paid for through a grant from the legacy fund. In addition, so the numbers we've gone through are for our general fund giving. We also receive restricted gifts. And so this is just a report on that. Our income, we had $162,000 of restricted gifts. And most of that, the $92,892, was to the 50-50 giving initiative. And then this report also shows our spending of restricted gifts, and we spent $62,000 this first 6 months. And so there's more detail in the written report that breaks all that out, so you're welcome to look at that. But are there any questions that anyone has on finances? Okay, thank you.
Praise God that we are in such a good position financially due to our congregational faithful giving. So thank you, everyone. I'm inviting Lauren Westling up now from the Good Neighbors team. The Good Neighbors team was one of our programs that we designated for 50-50 this year. So she's going to give us a little update.
Hello, as she said, I'm Lauren Westling with Salem's Good Neighbor team. I wanted to start by thanking you, the Salem community, for the love and support you gave our team through the 50-50 giving campaign and the Connecting Lunch. These events blessed us with a number of new volunteers stepping forward to join our team, and I am happy to say we are now waiting to be matched with another refugee family. We were also surprised to learn that there are a number of Salem's members who have experienced teaching English as a second language, and even more importantly, are interested in starting an English as a second language class. We are waiting to hear back from Arrive about how this can be started. Over the past year I have been with Salem's Good Neighbor team. I have felt honored by the love and trust these families give and felt privileged to watch these courageous families build their lives anew. I also have been able to see the love pour out from our community towards these families. Last year, while preparing for the arrival of a new family, my husband and I went to pick up some couches which had been listed on Facebook Marketplace. The seller learned we were getting the furniture for a refugee family, and he promptly said, "Come back, we have more." He and his wife donated enough furniture to furnish most of the apartment, and we were able to give that furniture to the family when they later moved to their new home. In another instance, I took a family to Hidden Treasures thrift store after learning the father only had 2 pairs of pants, one of which was pajamas. When we entered the door, a staff member greeted us, and upon learning they were a refugee family who had recently arrived to the United States, she spoke to the store manager, and together they offered them store credit to help them buy what they needed and emphasized their appreciation for my having brought them there so that they could help. This outpouring of love embodies the passage in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 33 through 34. Treat foreigners as you would citizens, and love them as you love yourself. Again, thank you so much, Salem, for helping our group to continue to show God's love toward refugees and immigrant families. If you too would like to join our team, please reach out to myself or Kate Stevens. We're both in the church directory. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. It's fun to hear those stories of God's work through this team. I'm inviting Alice back up, Pastor Alice back up, to give an update on our safety and security project.
This is my night of subbing for others who can't be here. So Matt Russell was going to give you the report this evening, but he's not able to be here with us. So I'd like to update you on where we are in our safety and updates that we'd like to be doing. Just to remind you, what we're trying to do is provide a safer, more secure environment for our children and our youth. We're particularly concerned about those who are attending our preschool, as they're quite isolated on that lower level. This is a large building, and in the event of an emergency or an intruder, we want to be sure we have done all we can to keep people safe. The team members that have been working on this project, just so you know, are Matt Russell, Andrew Stonina, Marcy Tenzing, and myself. We have been working with Miller Dunwoody Architects on the plans, and also with GSSC, the security company, to help us look at our situation and address the concerns that we have. We've also talked with Shannon Stoffel, our preschool director, with Shelley Streeper with youth, and with Lynn McDonald and our children, so that they're aware of what we're thinking and making sure that we are meeting the needs that they are feeling they have. We are continuing to update the leadership team on a consistent basis so they know our plans as well. So what I'd like to do tonight is just to show you, we're going to be installing some glass walls and doors in 4 places in our building. So we'll begin. The first one will be installed at the base of the east end steps, and it'll come out about 10 feet at the bottom of the steps, creating an alcove for families to be safely on the floor and not standing on the steps as they're dropping off their children. So that will be number 1 that we're doing. The second one will be at the base of the center stairs. So if you come down those center stairs immediately to the right, there will be a glass wall and door. And we are choosing to do glass because we want to keep things as light and airy and open as possible, and also because we do want to see what's going on. We don't want people hidden behind a lot of walls. The third wall that we will be creating is going to be right on the corner. You'll see the elevator there on the left. The wall will be coming right beyond that, so that will secure the main youth and children's area at that end of the building. And then the last one will actually be put upstairs at this west end at the top of those steps, so that we can have them secured our entire lower level in the event that we have an emergency or an intruder. These entrances will be keyed and coded. We're still working with GSSC to determine how that will be done. They will be staffed on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights. We're not trying to limit access for those that need to be there, but we're trying to prevent others from going that should not be down there. You know, we've had purses stolen on Wednesday evening when people have come in that shouldn't be in there. We've had various things happen, and so, again, trying to be welcoming, but also create as safe a space as we can. So, and also, just so you know, along with addressing these 4 security pieces, we will be replacing the window that's on the center stairway. If you've looked at that at all, it is rusting and definitely needs to be done. So that's being addressed at the same time. So these changes, they're going to mean some adaptations for all of us that use the lower level. It might feel inconvenient at times, but if we're willing to work together, I really believe we can make this work for the good of all, particularly for our children and our students. So upon final approval of the plans and the cost for the project, we will then set the date for construction. I'm anticipating it will be early summer. At this point, we want to be as least disruptive to our preschool as we can, and their sessions as well, but that's what we're anticipating at this point. I also want to let you know, like I said, don't have the final numbers yet, but the reason we're even able to consider this project is that we were given a dedicated gift that will cover the bulk of it. And so that is allowing us to move forward to create a little bit safer space. So that's the report from the Safety Committee. I don't know if you have any questions that I might be able to try to answer for you this evening. Yes?
So if the door is effectively locked when the kids are in preschool, what do we do on Fridays when we have mothers and preschoolers program and we need to use the gym? Will the code to open the door be given to people?
It will be given to key leaders that are going to be in ministry areas, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, our goal is not to hinder ministry from happening. So we will be identifying where those codes and things need to go. That's a great question.
I'm just wondering, are we gonna be like one by one installed? You know, like we're not gonna do all 4 of them at the same time, or?
This project will all be addressed at the same time. Now, how the construction company will do it, I'm not sure, but we will address all of them at one time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to invite Jared Eliason from our nominating committee to come on up and give a quick update on the nominating committee.
Just a few quick updates tonight on the nominating committee. First of all, I'm Jared Eliason, serving my first 3-year term, I believe is right. And wanted to introduce the other members of the nominating committee as well. So if you could just stand when I say your name. Sally Anderson, who's in her second 3-year term. She's out, but wanted to introduce anyways. Pam Stavum in her first 3-year term. As well as Terry Bjorklund. He's serving 1 year as an interim member of the nominating committee. Real quick, our purpose, the nominating committee, is to discover and confirm members for the leadership team and the nominating committee. In terms of our process, we meet multiple times a year throughout the year to pray, discuss, review candidates for both the leadership team and the nominating committee, and some resulting conversations, discussions from those meetings that we have together. At this time, we are in need of 3 additional members to serve on the nominating committee, and 1 to 2 additional members for the leadership team. If anyone's interested, I believe we do have applications here tonight. And you can also contact Heidi, the church chair, or one of us on the nominating committee as well. So that's it.
Thank you, Jared. And Pastor Mark and myself, or a member from the leadership team, also sit on the nominating committee. So we do have a few applications, though that voting will take place at the annual meeting in July. So feel free to reach out with any questions. All right, thank you for all those great updates. It is exciting to hear all the things that are going on at Salem. At this time, I will ask if there's any new business that needs to be addressed. I think everyone wants to get home to their warm, their warm houses. Excellent. All right, Cindy, if you'd like to come up for our closing hymn, that would be fantastic.